Scorpio, there is a moment that does not leave you a split second, so sharp it slices through the years that follow when your soul suddenly knows what your heart tried to deny. That they were never on your side. Not truly. Not in the way you were for them. And it's not just the pain of being lied to, used, discarded like a tool after service. It's the shame, the internal collapse, the realization that while you were defending them in rooms where their name was never even mentioned, they were handing your secrets to your enemies, laughing behind your back, enjoying the way you burned while still asking for your warmth. And Scorpio, because you are who you are, a creature of loyalty so fierce it borders on obsession, of devotion so deep it rewrites your bones you didn't see it coming. Or rather, you saw it and still gave them the benefit of the doubt. Again and again, until your own soul had to scream to be heard. Until the betrayal became so loud it cracked your ribs. Until the universe stepped in and tore the veil away so violently that you could never pretend again. They used what was sacred in you. They took the deepest parts, the pieces you don't show the world, the vulnerability you wrapped in silence, the protection you gave even when it cost you everything, and they turned it into currency. They weaponized your care. They studied your love, and when they learned its rhythm, they twisted it to fit their games. But here's what no one has said to you. Not in the way you needed this wasn't just betrayal. This was a bloodletting of false gods. This was the incineration of illusions that you had been gripping too tightly. This was the storm that came not to destroy you, but to force you to awaken. Because Scorpio, you do not rise gently. You rise from ashes. You rise when the world burns. And this heartbreak, this abandonment, this humiliation, it was the ignition. You thought you were drowning, but you were being boiled clean. The version of you that loved them, that version was too soft, too forgiving, too full of hope that people would grow into the love you gave them. But some people do not want to grow. Some people do not want to be healed. They only want to feed, and you, brilliant and burning and blind with belief, kept pouring water into a cup that had no bottom. The betrayal came to stop you, because you never would have stopped on your own. You would have kept giving, kept sacrificing, kept believing that if you just loved harder, still longer, forgave one more time, they would wake up and meet you in the sacred middle, where true connection begins. But they never intended to meet you there. They wanted what you had, not who you are. They wanted the power of being chosen by someone like you, but they never intended to become someone who could truly choose you back. And so the universe cut the cord for you. Scorpio, this wasn't just the end of a relationship. This was an exorcism. You had surrounded yourself with masks, with people who adored the image of you but recoiled from your truth. People who wanted the wisdom but not the wound, the passion but not the possession. They praised your loyalty until it demanded accountability. And when you asked for honesty, they disappeared. Or worse, they lied again, because they never expected you to survive without them. But you did. You are, and even though some nights still sting, even though there are mornings when your mind replays what they said, how they looked at you, how they twisted the story to make you the villain in the tragedy they wrote. The truth is this: you are more alive now than you have ever been. Because this time, you are seeing without illusions. You are feeling without filters. You are burning through everything that was never real. And what remains, what is slowly beginning to emerge, is something sacred, something sovereign, something so entirely yours that no one will ever be able to touch it again without earning it, not through promises, but through presence, through action, through truth. You are no longer the version of yourself who needed to be loved to feel worthy. You are no longer seeking validation from people who couldn't even look you in the eye when they lied to you. You are no longer carrying the weight of keeping peace in relationships where there was no justice, no safety, no return. And if you miss them, and some days you will remember this, they didn't leave because you were too much. They left because they could never meet you where you were going. And if they betrayed you, they didn't break you. They revealed themselves, and the universe made sure you saw them clearly before it was too late. You did not lose love. You lost the illusion that what you were receiving was love. And now you are free to begin again, not with less love, but with wiser love, not with a closed heart, but with a fortified soul, not as someone who doubts their own worth, but as someone who knows that what you offer is rare, sacred, and not to be wasted on those who come only to take. You are not broken. You are becoming. And the world has no idea who they are about to meet, because the Scorpio that rises from betrayal is not the same one who fell for the lie. They are reborn, and they carry fire in their bones. There comes a moment when even the most guarded heart can no longer protect itself from the truth. For Scorpio, that moment doesn't explode with fire. It settles slowly, like cold water leaking through cracks you didn't know were there. You don't scream. You don't beg. You just go quiet. And when a Scorpio goes quiet, it means the illusion has cracked. The mask they wore, the one they used to charm, to disarm, to convince you they were safe, it slips. Not all at once. Not in some grand betrayal you can point at with certainty. No. It happens in pieces. A glance too sharp, a lie that doesn't land, a laugh that sounds wrong. At first, you question yourself. You wonder if you're overreacting, if your trauma is painting shadows where there is still light, but your body knows. It always knows, and eventually, the mind catches up. You see them now. Not who they pretended to be, not who you hoped they would become, but who they are. Underneath the stories, underneath the promises, underneath the performances that you so badly wanted to believe, it is not a beautiful sight. In fact, it's ugly. Not because they're monstrous, but because they're small, so much smaller than you thought. Smaller than the love you gave, smaller than the future you imagined. And maybe that's what hurts the most, realizing that you built your world around a mask that never had the strength to stay on. The Scorpios don't love halfway. You study people before you let them in. And when you choose deeply. You give loyalty before it's earned and trust before it's proven, because your heart is wired for intensity, not convenience. You don't want surface level anything. You want the truth, even if it hurts. But what no one warned you about is how much it breaks you when someone keeps lying. Even after you've given them 100 chances to be real. They could have told the truth. You would have handled it. You would have respected them more if they had just been honest. But they kept the mask on, even when they knew it was slipping. They chose the illusion over the real connection, and you kept holding the pieces together for both of you. Long after it stopped making sense, you didn't want to lose them. You didn't want to start over. You didn't want to admit that the person you believed in was a role they played to earn your love, so you convinced yourself. You softened your instincts. You made excuses. You filled in the gaps in their integrity with the strength of your own. You carried the weight of two people while they floated in the comfort of your silence. But something changed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was subtle. A shift in how you looked at them. A numbness where the fire used to be. You stopped asking questions. You stopped reaching out. Not because you didn't care, but because you already knew the answers. And when the mask finally fell all the way, with no more lies left to hold it up, it didn't shock you. It confirmed what you already felt. What you saw beneath that mask wasn't a villain. It was someone too afraid to be real. Someone who wanted your power, but not the responsibility of standing beside it. Someone who admired your strength, but resented what it revealed in them. Someone who couldn't keep up, so they tried to slow you down. The revelation didn't come with closure. It came with silence. You didn't get the apology. You didn't get the explanation. You didn't even get the truth from their mouth. But you didn't need it. The truth was already in front of you in the way they avoided accountability, in the way they blamed you for their failures, in the way they turned your kindness into currency and spent it recklessly. You didn't lose a soulmate. You lost a mirror that was never accurate. You didn't walk away from a deep love. You walked away from a performance that drained your spirit. And what that mask revealed when it finally collapsed under its own weight was not just who they were, but who you had become while loving them. You saw how far you had bent, how often you had stayed quiet, how many times you had betrayed your own instincts to keep the connection alive. You saw the ways you had shrunk yourself, the ways you had delayed your own growth, the dreams you had shelved, the boundaries you erased to make space for someone who never intended to meet you halfway. And now, the silence that follows is not emptiness. It is clarity. It's not cold. It's clean. You know what you know. You see what you see. And though there's grief in that knowledge, there's also power. Because you'll never unsee it. You'll never unknow what you now carry. And that is where transformation begins. Scorpio. This part of the journey isn't glamorous. It's not triumphant. It's quiet, internal, and often lonely. You don't want revenge. You don't need to prove anything. You just want peace. You want your energy back. You want your mind to stop spinning. And slowly, one breath at a time, the mask fell, and in its place, something else appeared. Not them. You, the real you, the one who tolerated too much, the one who stayed too long, the one who loved too hard in the wrong direction. That version of you is not weak. That version is wise. That version is done pretending. That version is not looking to be saved. They are looking to be seen by you, because now, you're starting to realize something you should have known all along. You were never asking for too much. You were simply asking the wrong person. And now that the mask is gone, there is no going back. Only forward. There is a moment after the collapse. After the mask falls and the silence settles, when everything inside you goes still, it's not peace. Not yet. It's the absence of noise. The ache has dulled. The anger no longer claws. And the questions that once circled your mind like vultures have grown quiet. You don't feel victorious. You don't feel free. You just feel different. And that difference is where the fire begins. It does not start with rage. Scorpio doesn't burn that way. The fire starts like a whisper in your chest, a subtle thrum beneath your ribs, a pulse of heat that doesn't rush to the surface, doesn't demand attention, doesn't scream for justice. It waits, it gathers, it builds in the places you thought were ruined. It grows slowly in the cracks that betrayal left behind, filling them with something stronger than what came before. It is not loud. It is not bright. It is steady, and it is entirely yours. You may not have known it was still there. The pain made you forget the weight of trying to love someone who didn't love you back, not fully. Not honestly dimmed your memory of yourself. You forgot how powerful you are when you stopped pouring all of your light into other people's shadows. You forgot how dangerous your silence can be, not because you use it to wound, but because you use it to rebuild. Now, as the days pass and the distance grows, you begin to notice changes in yourself. Small things. At first, you don't flinch when their name comes up. You don't rush to re-explain the story. You no longer check if they've come looking for you, because deep down, you've accepted that they won't wait. And even deeper down, you no longer need them to. You stopped needing closure. You stopped needing to be understood. You stopped needing them to realize what they lost. And that shift, that quiet closing of a door you no longer wish to walk through, that is the fire. It's not dramatic. It's not explosive. It doesn't burn things to ash. It changes you from the inside out. It clears the fog. It sharpens your instincts. It reminds you what you used to know before you forgot yourself in the process of trying to save someone who was never drowning. They were only dragging you down to make themselves feel taller. This fire is not for revenge. It is not for performance. It is for reclamation. It is the fire that returns when you stop begging for breadcrumbs. It is the fire that returns when you set your own table. It is the fire that returns when you stop hoping they'll come back and finally see you, and instead begin seeing yourself clearly, honestly, fully for the first time in years. And what you see is not broken, not too much, not too intense. You see someone who stayed too long because they believed in the good, someone who tried because love mattered, someone who hurt because they were real. That is not weakness. That is evidence. Evidence that your heart is not made of glass, it is made of steel wrapped in velvet. It bleeds. Yes, but it rebuilds. And it remembers. This is the part they don't talk about. The after, when you no longer want them back, not because you hate them, not because you're better, but because something in you has shifted permanently. And now, your fire is too valuable to be burned for anyone who cannot hold it with care. You begin choosing differently. You begin speaking less and watching more. You begin saying no, not with bitterness, but with certainty. You begin asking yourself what you truly want, not what you can tolerate, not what you can survive, but what actually nourishes you. And if the answer isn't clear, you wait. Because the old version of you rushed to fill silence with noise, to fill space with people, to fill pain with distraction. But this version, the one with the fire in their chest, they know how to sit with discomfort. They know how to wait for what's real. Scorpio, this fire was always yours, but you had been using it to keep others warm while you froze in the dark. You had been building homes in other people's hearts while your own was starving. You had been lighting the way for people who never turned around to offer you a hand. And now you keep your fire for yourself. Not because you've become selfish, but because you've become wise. You know now that not everyone deserves access, that not every hand held out in friendship is empty of knives, that not every lover who looks into your eyes is looking at you sometimes. They're only looking at what they can take. So you protect your fire. You guard it. You learn to tend it in silence. You let it grow slowly, honestly, without rush, without apology, and it begins to change you. You walk differently. You speak differently. You no longer chase. You no longer explain. You no longer shrink. Because when you know the fire is yours, you don't beg anyone to keep you warm. You've become the source now. And Scorpio, this is only the beginning. You didn't choose this. Let's begin there. You didn't wake up one morning and say, let it all fall apart. You didn't ask to lose what you thought was real. You didn't want the silence, the distance, the realization that what you loved was not what it claimed to be. You didn't want to grow through destruction. But sometimes, Scorpio, the path you were meant to walk will not reveal itself until everything you built on false ground has been burned to the earth. That's what this was. Not just betrayal, not just heartbreak. It was collapse. And the rubble. It became your altar. The pain carved something open in you, something that could not have opened through peace, through comfort, through slow, gentle change. You needed the rupture. You needed the shock. You needed the devastation. Not because you deserved it, but because your soul knew you would never have left that version of life without being torn from it. You were loyal. To loyal. You would have stayed. You would have kept giving, kept justifying, kept seeing potential in someone who had already shown you who they were 100 times. You would have kept trying to save something that was not meant to be saved. Because you didn't want to believe it was empty. You didn't want to believe you were alone in the effort, and so pain had to step in. The pain didn't come to punish you. It came to redirect you. Because the life you were building, even if it looked good on the outside, was not built for who you truly are. It was built around someone else's comfort, someone else's needs, someone else's illusion of who you should be. And Scorpio, you've always known how to disappear into someone else's idea of you. You wear masks well. You know how to become what others want. You know how to adapt, how to mold, how to survive by blending in, but you can't live there. Not for long. And you did. For too long, until it started to kill something inside you slowly, silently, gently enough that you didn't notice until it was almost too late. But then the pain came. It broke the mirror. It forced you to look at the version of yourself that had been walking around trying to be lovable by shrinking, by pleasing, by silencing your own instincts, the version of you that twisted into someone else's idea of what a partner, a friend, a lover, a child, a leader should be. The version that wore approval like armor and called it safety, that version had to die. And it did. Not all at once. Not cleanly, but piece by piece. Over days and nights that blurred together in a fog of confusion and anger and exhaustion, you cried in places no one saw. You questioned your sanity. You doubted your ability to ever trust again. You wondered if maybe you really were the problem. But underneath it all, something else was stirring. A knowing, a quiet voice that didn't offer comfort, but offered clarity. It told you this is the cost of becoming real, and now you are walking a path that is not lit by validation, not paved by the approval of others, not wide and safe and easy. This path is narrow, it is unmarked, and sometimes it is lonely, but it is yours, entirely, finally, truly yours. You are no longer walking towards someone else's idea of success. You are not chasing a version of love that demands you shrink to be held. You are not chasing people who only love what you give. Not who you are. You are not running after healing in someone else's arms. You are standing still and letting what is real rise. This path is not filled with answers. It is filled with questions you're brave enough to sit with. It is filled with silence you no longer fear. It is filled with decisions made not from desperation, but from alignment. You start to notice what no longer fits. The conversations that drain you, the habits that numb you, the relationships that operate like old contracts. Ones you never agreed to but kept signing anyway. And slowly, you begin to release them. Not with anger, not with blame, with truth. Because you know now, everything you cling to out of fear becomes a weight. Everything you hold on to because you're afraid to be alone becomes a chain. And Scorpio, you were not born for cages. You were born for depth, for truth, for silence that heals instead of harms, for solitude that strengthens, not isolates. So you walk. Some days are heavy. Some nights are sharp. But you keep walking because now you see it. The future that wasn't visible before, the one hidden behind the life you thought you wanted, a future where your fire isn't feared, but honored, where your loyalty is matched, where your silence isn't used against you, but protected with reverence, where love doesn't mean performing, and belonging doesn't require betrayal of self. This path, the one that opened through pain, is the only one that could have led you here. And even if it hurt like hell, even if it broke every bone in your emotional body, even if it left you crawling on the floor of your own heart, it did something else too. It gave you back to yourself. And that, Scorpio, was always the point. Close your eyes now, not to forget, but to remember differently. Let the noise fall away. Let the questions loosen their grip. Let the cold memory of betrayal fade. not into nothingness, but into perspective, a single chapter, not the whole story. You've carried enough. There is nothing more to fix, nothing more to prove. The war is over. What remains now is you, the version of you that survived, that stood in the wreckage and did not crumble, that watched the life you once wanted collapse in front of you and still found a way to breathe through the dust. You didn't know how you would. You didn't plan your healing. You didn't have a map, but step by step, moment by moment, something inside you kept moving forward. That something was not rage. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't pride. It was your soul, whispering, "We're not done yet." And now here you are. Not the same. Never the same. And that is not a tragedy. That is transformation. You don't shine the same way anymore, but it's better, softer, deeper, keener. Before, you burned for everyone. Now, you choose where the light goes. Before, you gave yourself away too easily. Now, you protect your own energy like sacred ground. And it is because you are sacred ground now. You don't need to tell your story to be validated. You don't need them to apologize. You don't need to reframe what happened into a lesson. Though yes, it became one. You don't need to be grateful for the betrayal. You don't need to forgive in order to be free. You only need to rest in the knowing that you made it out. And more than that, you came back to yourself. Scorpio. Not everyone understands what it means to live with depth, to love with no guard, to sacrifice parts of yourself for connection and then rebuild them in the dark. But you do. You have walked that path. You have lost parts of yourself in other people's hands, and you have stitched them back together with silence, with solitude, with the kind of patience no one sees. They don't need to see it. And tonight, that is enough. There is peace in this moment. Not because everything is healed, not because every wound has closed, but because you are no longer trying to go back to who you were before it broke. You know now that version of you, though, full of love, was also full of fear. Afraid to lose, afraid to disappoint, afraid to be alone. But alone was never the enemy. The real danger was the version of you that thought survival meant staying small. Now, you know better. Now, you don't chase connection, you create it. You don't chase love, you embody it. You don't silence your truth to be chosen, you speak. And let what resonates find you. And when you lie in the dark tonight, know this: you were never too intense. You were never too complicated. You were never the problem. You were simply growing in a place that could not hold your becoming, so it broke. And in the breaking, you rose. Not like a phoenix in fire and spectacle, but like the slow return of breath after panic. Like water returning to stillness after storm. Like light creeping through the cracks of a house you thought would never feel safe again. That is your rising lows. Steady, quiet, complete. The ashes were never the end. They were the beginning. And this version of you, this one is not afraid.